Every morning, just after sunrise, the tiny bear cub would appear at the edge of the tree line. It never growled. Never came too close. It just stared, wide-eyed, trembling and silent. Ellie, a wildlife volunteer staying in the remote valley for the summer, had never seen anything like it. The cub returned day after day, sometimes pacing, sometimes pawing the ground as if begging for something. Not food. Not help. Something else. On the 7th morning, as golden light spilled across the dewy grass, Ellie made a decision: she would follow it. What she discovered deep in the forest would change her forever. Because hidden beneath a fallen ravine and a nest of twisted branches were 2 more cubs. Alive, but barely. And the truth of how they got there would reveal not just a mother's sacrifice, but a secret that someone desperately wanted to keep buried. Ellie McAdams had seen her fair share of wildlife. After 2 years working in national park rescue programs, she thought she'd learned how to read the woods, the way the wind shifted before rain, how animals moved when humans weren't around, the subtle signs of danger or peace. But nothing prepared her for the little bear cub. It started on a Wednesday. She had just stepped out of her rented forest cabin in Silver Ridge Valley, coffee in hand, ready to start another round of trail inspection. But there, about 50 feet away at the edge of the pines, stood a lone cub, small, dark-furred, barely old enough to be on its own. It stared at her. Not with fear. Not with aggression. With urgency. Ellie froze. Cubs usually weren't alone. A mother bear nearby would have been dangerous. But there was no movement. No sounds in the forest behind it. Only silence and those dark, intelligent eyes watching her. And then, as quickly as it appeared, the cub turned and slipped back into the trees. Ellie assumed it was a one-time sighting. A lost cub passing through. But the next morning, at the same time, 6:14 a.m. to be exact, the cub returned. It stood in the same place. Same posture. Same pleading stare. This time, it pawed the ground once. Then twice. Then it left. The 3rd morning, Ellie was waiting. She didn't move. Just watched from her porch, heart fluttering with both curiosity and caution. The cub appeared again, even closer than before. It didn't come for food, she had put none out. It didn't vocalize. It simply looked at her, deliberately, then turned and walked slowly toward the woods. Ellie stood up. This wasn't a random encounter. The cub was trying to communicate. Something was wrong. And someone needed to listen. Ellie didn't tell anyone she was following a bear. She knew how it would sound: reckless, emotional, maybe even foolish. But something about the cub's behavior tugged at her gut, the kind of instinct she'd learned to trust. So the next morning, just after dawn, Ellie packed a day pack with essentials: water, a first aid kit, gloves, energy bars, and her satellite phone. She left a note on her cabin door. Hiking South Trail, back by sunset. At exactly 6:12 a.m., the cub emerged again from the trees. This time, Ellie was waiting, boots on, hood up, camera slung but unused. She stepped forward slowly. "I'm not here to hurt you," she whispered. The cub stared for a moment, then turned and trotted into the trees. Ellie followed. The cub didn't move like a wild animal. It moved like it knew where it was going. Ellie kept her distance, staying about 20 paces behind, careful not to spook it. They moved south, deeper into the forest where old-growth pines grew close together and the moss muffled every footstep. Time passed, 20 minutes, then 30. The cub paused often, looking back to make sure she was still there. It never ran. Never growled. It just led. Eventually, the trail began to slope downward. Ellie stepped over fallen logs and ducked under low branches, her boots slipping slightly on damp leaves. Then she heard it. A sound, faint but distinct. A whimper. Not from the cub she was following, but from somewhere ahead. The cub darted forward suddenly, vanishing behind a thick wall of brush and snow-covered bramble. Ellie's heart pounded. She pushed through. What she saw stole the breath from her lungs. A large sinkhole, more like a collapsed ravine, opened in the earth ahead. Jagged roots jutted out from the sides. Snow clung to the edges. Down below, maybe 10 feet deep, were 2 bear cubs, barely moving. One was trying to stand, its legs trembling. The other lay limp, its breath shallow and ragged. Both were covered in dirt and pine needles. One had a gash across its back leg. The hole was too steep for them to climb out on their own, and clearly, they'd been trapped for days. Ellie gasped. The cub that had led her stood at the edge of the hole, peering down, then looking at Ellie as if to say, "Now you know. Help them." She dropped to her knees and reached for her radio, hands shaking. "Dispatch, this is Ellie McAdams. I found 2 trapped bear cubs. Repeat, 2 bear cubs, alive but injured. I need rescue assistance and wildlife transport now." Her voice cracked. They wouldn't have survived another night. 45 minutes later, the rescue team arrived, 2 wildlife rangers and a veterinarian named Dr. Jonah Wells. They came fast, responding to the emergency signal Ellie sent through her satellite phone. By then, she'd already climbed partway into the pit, securing the weaker cub in her coat and cradling it close to her body to keep it warm. "She kept them alive," Ellie whispered as Jonah examined the injured cub. "The one that led me here, she must have been feeding them somehow. Or standing watch." Jonah looked up, stunned. "Are you saying the other cub brought you here?" Ellie nodded. "Every morning. She kept coming back to my cabin. I think she was asking for help." The stronger of the 2 trapped cubs whimpered softly as it was lifted out by harness. The other barely stirred, but its pulse was steady. "We're not out of the woods yet," Jonah said, wrapping the cub's leg. "But they've got a chance now." Ellie exhaled shakily. She didn't realize she'd been holding her breath for hours. Back at the mobile wildlife clinic, Ellie stayed by the cubs as they were treated. The stronger one, now dubbed Shadow, showed signs of dehydration and minor bruises. The weaker cub, Moss, was still unconscious, but the bleeding had stopped. Meanwhile, the cub that had led her, now affectionately called Scout, paced nervously outside the treatment tent, unable to be contained. "She's not leaving them," Ellie said quietly. Jonah nodded. "She's probably the eldest. Maybe the only one mobile after the fall. She must have stayed nearby the whole time." Then his expression darkened. "But here's what I don't understand. That pit, it didn't look natural." Ellie's heart stopped. "What do you mean?" Jonah grabbed his tablet and opened a photo he took at the scene. "See here? Tool marks. Clean edges. This wasn't a collapse. Someone dug this." Ellie's stomach turned. "Are you saying it was a trap?" Jonah nodded grimly. "A trap. 4 bears." Later that evening, Ellie returned to the site with Ranger Dina Madsen. The cubs were stable at the mobile clinic. Scout had finally calmed down and was sleeping nearby. But Ellie couldn't rest. They found it just beyond the pit, a set of boot prints, half melted by the sun but unmistakably human. Size 10 or 11, deep treads, possibly a hiking or work boot. They led away from the trap and vanished into a dense section of pine. "No blood," Dina said, "but enough signs of movement. Someone was here, and they didn't want to be found." "Illegal trappers?" Ellie asked. "Could be. Or someone testing traps before winter." Either way, Ellie thought, it wasn't just an accident. Those cubs hadn't just fallen. They'd been left. She looked down at the marks again, at the careless cruelty of it all. And thought of Scout, returning every morning like clockwork. Trying to get someone, anyone, to care. The next morning, Ellie returned to the ridge near the pit site alone. She couldn't let it go. The tool marks. The boots. The fact that someone had done this, and the only ones who knew, were 3 bear cubs. She hiked a wide loop around the area, eyes scanning for anything unusual. That's when she saw it. A thin curl of smoke rising between the trees, far from any trail, where no ranger post should be. She followed it cautiously. 10 minutes later, she found a crude camp, a green tarp tied between 2 trees, a metal stove, and a rusted blue pickup parked half hidden behind brush. She crouched behind a boulder and watched. Then he stepped out. A man in his 50s, scruffy beard, orange cap. He looked like a hunter, except hunting season had ended weeks ago. A rifle leaned against a tree near the fire. Ellie pulled out her phone and took pictures. This was him. She didn't confront him. Not yet. But now she had proof. Back at the mobile clinic, Shadow and Moss were recovering well. They'd taken to eating mashed fruit and formula again. But Scout was different. She paced. Restless. On edge. That night, A loud clatter woke Ellie. She rushed outside to find the back gate of the enclosure wide open. Scout was gone. Tracks in the frost told the story. Scout had escaped. And she was headed back into the woods. Ellie didn't hesitate. She grabbed her flashlight, jacket, and tracker radio. I trusted her once, she told Jonah. And she led me to the truth. I'm trusting her again. Ellie followed the prints deep into the woods. Her breath frosted in the air. The trees closed in like silent witnesses. Then, movement. Scout appeared in a clearing, standing still. Waiting. Ellie stepped closer. Scout turned and walked forward again, slowly then faster, leading Ellie across a narrow stream and up a rocky slope until they reached a rusted fence. Beyond it, the same illegal camp. Scout froze, growling low. Then Ellie saw it, cages. Old. Folded wire traps. Chains. Bones. This wasn't a hunting post. This was a poacher's trap site. Scout had brought her back, not just to remember, to reveal. To someone who could make it stop. Ellie stayed low in the brush, watching the flickering firelight from the poacher's camp. Scout crouched beside her, eerily quiet for a cub. She seemed to understand. The man emerged again, dragging something, meat, strung in wire, and tossed it beside a trap. Her heart pounded. This wasn't hunting. This was cruelty. It was the same trap that had nearly killed Moss and Shadow. She raised her phone again, documenting everything, the setup, the man's movements, the tags on the vehicle. Then, she stepped on a branch. It snapped. The man froze, head whipping toward the sound. Who's there? Ellie stood. No more hiding, she said, stepping into the light. Put your hands where I can see them. You. What the hell are you? I'm with the park, Ellie cut him off. And I've reported this site. Rangers are en route. He took a step toward the gun near the tree. Scout growled, loud, primal, furious. The man paused. And in that moment, something in his eyes changed. Not fear. Recognition. That bear, he muttered. That's the one that keeps coming back. Then he smiled. She remembers. It all snapped into place. Scout had been here before. With her mother. Maybe even when the trap had been set. And now the man who dug the pit, who watched her siblings suffer, stood before her again. Scout took a step forward. Not attacking. Not backing down. Just standing her ground. The man reached again for the weapon. Ellie moved first, kicked it out of reach and tackled him with a ranger's ferocity she hadn't used in years. Don't move, she shouted, planting her boot on his wrist. He struggled for a moment, but then, hearing the distant call of an approaching ATV engine, he slumped in defeat. You're done, she hissed. Behind her, Scout let out a long, low growl, not a threat. A promise. By midday, the camp was cleared, the man arrested, and the evidence catalogued. Jonah helped Ellie guide Scout back to the enclosure. The little bear didn't resist this time. She'd completed what she set out to do. She'd saved her siblings. She'd remembered the threat. She'd brought help. And now, she was ready to rest. Over the next week, Scout stayed close to Moss and Shadow. She curled up with them at night, gently licking Moss's mending wound. Shadow, who'd been the first to bounce back, now wrestled playfully with Scout every morning. But Ellie noticed something else. Scout never looked out toward the woods anymore. She didn't need to. She had what she'd been trying to save, and the human who had listened when no one else did. Jonah approached Ellie one morning. The three of them, they've bonded stronger than most sibling sets I've seen. We might be able to reintroduce them as a group. Ellie smiled. Not just might. We will. Because now, they had a chance. Because one little bear refused to give up. Spring came early that year. By March, Moss had fully recovered, strong enough to climb, run, and wrestle with her siblings. Scout remained the smallest, but no one doubted her strength anymore. Ellie stayed involved through it all, helping monitor their behavior, documenting their play sessions, and preparing them for the day they would be returned to the wild. Not just one bear. Not two. All three. Together. The enclosure had become their temporary home, but every day they paced the fence a little more. Sniffed the wind. Climbed the branches. Practiced being wild again. Ellie didn't cry when they loaded the bears into their travel crates. She smiled, proud, strong. Until she saw Scout pause. Just before stepping into the cage, the little cub turned back. Looked right at Ellie. Not with fear. Not confusion. But something else. A knowing. Then she stepped inside, calm and ready. The release site was carefully chosen, miles away from the poacher's camp, in a lush protected reserve thick with salmon streams and tall birches. The 3 crates were placed side by side and unlatched at once. At first, silence. Then Shadow leapt out first, galloping into the woods with joy. Moss followed, slower but steady, stopping to sniff the base of a tree. Scout lingered. She stepped to the edge of the crate and turned once more toward Ellie and Jonah, who stood together just a few yards away. Then, she huffed softly and ran after her siblings, disappearing into the trees. The woods swallowed them up, their home taking them back like a secret whispered into a friend's ear. Ellie wiped her eyes but said nothing. Jonah did too. They didn't need to say it. It was right. 2 weeks later, Ellie returned to her small cabin for the last time. She'd taken a permanent position with the Wildlife Emergency Network, coordinating rescues, tracking illegal traps, and helping local officers crack down on animal cruelty. Before leaving, she planted a wooden post near the edge of her property, in the exact spot where Scout used to appear. At the top of it, she carved a small inscription. She returned until someone followed. Now they all walk free. And beneath that, pawprint Scout, Moss and Shadow. Spring 2025. That night, Ellie sat on her porch one last time, watching the tree line as moonlight filtered through the leaves. She didn't expect anything. But still, she hoped. And sure enough, just before midnight, she saw it. A flicker of movement. Not close. Just a shadow, far beyond the trees. Watching. Only for a moment. Then gone. 3 years later. Silver Ridge had changed, and so had Ellie. The old ranger trails were cleaner now, regularly patrolled. Wildlife corridors had been expanded, new monitoring stations installed, and poaching in the region had dropped dramatically. The man responsible for the bear trap had been sentenced to 5 years under federal wildlife protection laws, the first successful prosecution of its kind in the region. And Ellie? She was now the lead coordinator for Wildlife Rapid Response, overseeing emergency rescue across the entire Northwest region. But she never forgot where it started. Every year, in the early spring, she returned to the cabin. Just for a few nights. To remember. And to watch. On her most recent visit, Ellie sat outside with a thermos of tea in hand, wrapped in an old flannel blanket, the sun melting the last of the snow. She hadn't seen Scout or the others in years. Rangers occasionally spotted a trio of bears together, unusually close-knit, but never near the cabin. It was enough to know they were thriving. She was just about to go back inside when a movement near the tree line caught her eye. She stood slowly. There, standing tall and strong, was a bear. Full-grown. Stocky. Amber-eyed. Scout. Ellie knew instantly. The way she held herself. The way she stood. But Scout wasn't alone. Behind her were 2 small cubs, wobbling, tumbling, playful, safe. Scout watched Ellie quietly, then turned to nudge her cubs forward. They stared at the human in confusion, then curiosity, before bounding after their mother into the trees. No words. Just presence. Just trust. A full circle. Later, Ellie added a final carving to the wooden post by the cabin. She came back. Not for help, but to show what love can do. When someone listens. And below it, Pawprint Scout's legacy lives on.